Okay, so it hasn't even been 2 days, not even 2 full days since this video went up. Already over 10,000 views. I think over 800 people took the poll, and it was overwhelmingly like 97% to 2% said clean it, fix it, restore it, and got a lot of cool suggestions and comments. One comment, the first time I seen it, I was like, oh no. This might actually be human sewage. That's gross. But how do we know? That's what I want to know. Can I send off a sample and get it tested? So the first thing I want to do is to save some of this nastiness, but it makes sense that it might actually be sewage. So if there is a way that we can do that, please leave a comment and I will see about making it happen. I'm curious, but I'm actually thinking that makes the most sense, that it is actually dried poop. And it's really thick on that back chip, isn't it? So, is that enough for a sample, you think? It's about the most of it I could get. The rest of it's just going to come off in the wash. And that's gross. Just to think that it might be sewage. As soon as the dude said it, I'm like, oh my god, he's got to be right. I mean, what other reason could there be? So, let's move on to washing this thing. Okay, so I know there's lots of suggestions like, oh, you need to ultrasonic clean it, or soak it in diluted vinegar. Like, no, that's just not going to happen here. I just use hot water and maybe a little brush on this deal just because it's so nasty. Well, it's caked on there. That's already looking a ton better. Wish my sprayer worked better. It doesn't. Because I'm seeing back in there behind all that. It's pretty gross still. I definitely need to take off the heat sink and possibly, yeah, I think the RF module does have a cover on it that we can take off without removing the whole thing. Alright, so to all the people that are going to say it, no, the water doesn't really hurt anything as long as there's no potential energy in it. So, like, turn on the console before you do this. or let it sit for a while. Ugh. Oh man, it's crusty. I think it pulled some of the aluminum threads with it. I'm definitely not worried about damaging the RF module because it's really rusty shape, and I'm probably going to replace it anyway, and I have replacements from NSRGB days. You know what, that still looks clean, but there's a whole lot of area below that PCB I'm not going to be able to get to until we remove the PCB. So kind of got mooned on that one. Can't take that plate off unless I desolder those 2 points. I was kind of hoping we could see the trace that we think is bad. I can see part of it. I don't see a break. So well, now all the major stuff is rinsed off. This is what I normally do, is spray it down with some diluted purple cleaner. It's called, I think the brand name is Purple Power. It's a degreaser. It's very strong. So I dilute it. You don't want to let the stuff dry too much. It does leave a heck of a residue. But I'm going to let that soak for 10 or 15 minutes. And this stuff will etch aluminum as well, so just be careful with it. Alright, so now I want to try to clean the cart connector a little better. So I've got some bed sheet cut to cover both sides of a credit card. That's usually what I use for cleaning this. Stick it in and just rock it back and forth a bunch. Go at it at a little different angles. This is exactly how I've been doing it for a very, very long time. I like the bed sheet because it's tougher than t-shirt material. Get a lot more use out of it. A lot less likely to leave any kind of threads or whatever in the connector. Less likely to catch on anything. I just like it a lot better. This is usually where I come in with a toothbrush, foam it up. I think I've only let it sit for maybe 5 minutes before turning the camera back on. Sucks not being able to get back in there a little more. Don't normally do that, but I'm just unsure how dirty that's going to be. So we'll let this sit for a few more minutes and then come rinse it off. Alright, been long enough. Water's hot. Rinse this thing off. Still smell something. Alright, after rinsing with water, I always spray them down with rubbing alcohol. I know there's grass back there, but straight down, it's concrete. I don't normally use that much, but this thing is dirty. And last step is to put it in front of a space heater to burn off all of the rubbing alcohol, water, leftover water if there is any. This was a 1300 or 1500 watt space heater. I'll leave it on low and then I'll just set it right up there against the fan. Maybe even up against the grill even. You can't get it hot enough to hurt it with a space heater. And I'll leave it there. I'll forget about it. I'll leave it there so long. It's not that big of a deal. Alright, so everything's dry from our initial cleaning. May not actually be done cleaning it. The sheet metal, RF shielding, whatever, I'm not worried about. I have a bunch of this stuff left over from other mods, like High Def NES. You leave both of these out, so I've got a bunch of these, but they're still reusable. They're not really that bad a shape, but they're just dirty enough. They're probably, well, yeah, if I High Def NES this, then obviously I'm not going to use them anyway. Looks like the reset button is a little bit grayed, or a little bit yellowed, I should say, just slightly. Didn't really see any yellowing on the top shell though. You can see it didn't quite get the corners clean on that. I'm not used to having to clean all those little crevices like that real tight. Bottom of the PCB, other than the rust, is perfect condition, and the screws are pretty crappy shape. That makes me wonder. I'm sure it would scrape off. So I think this is just like a hazel finish out here. Let me find something a little more abrasive here. Let's get this other junk out of the way. Here's the aluminum heat sink. You can see where I scraped off of the mud, left some marks on the aluminum. Could also polish that up a little bit more. Yeah, the bottom still got some crusty in there. It looks a lot better. And I knew that somebody tried to clean this, or it was in a flood, because this was also kind of a clue, because that's a paper sticker for the serial number, and it's just gone, completely gone. You know, I never did take out the throat, cart slot throat either. I meant to. Probably find some more crevices that need cleaned in here. Not something you normally do. Yeah, usually it's kind of a toothbrush thing through the flap. You get in there about like that. You might be able to clean the very bottom part that you can see, but up in here behind the flap, you're just not going to get to that. The flap itself, there's some crustiness there I need to get to still. And a little bit, yeah, in front of the flap, no. Yeah, the front side of the flap, or I guess the back side of the console. But most of this area I could actually scrub a little bit. Like down in these wells right here, there's no way I could get down in there, so I gotta find some kind of like a Christmas tree brush or something like that to get down in there. I'm actually thinking about putting these under the pressure washer. Top side though, man, that just looks, it looks excellent. This is why I've always loved top loader shells, is they've got a textured surface. So any scratches and whatnot, rub marks, dirt, it all just seems to clean off really well, as long as it's not yellowed. I did use a magic eraser on this quite heavily, especially right here. I thought that was a mark, but if I move the post underneath of it, I can actually make the crack open and close a little bit. See how it's getting lighter, darker? Guess I could zoom in on that, couldn't I? I'm pushing the post that way. So, not a huge deal. A lot of these are cracked. I could not get that mark to come off at all, and I scrubbed on with this magic eraser pretty hard. What's up with that? I'll often take a knife to it and then go back with your magic eraser and try to smooth it over. That looks a lot better. Some more garbage in there. Very typical to see garbage up in there. Even something that hasn't been flooded will probably be dirty right there. Yeah, the rest of the top shell looks really good. Quite pleased with it. But definitely get her a second wash and get that stuff cleaned up. Okay, now I wonder if the rust will come off of. Let's try one of these little pieces. Definitely getting the impression that it's working. It is a little bit wet too, my magic eraser, in case you're curious. If all those pins weren't in the way, this would be really easy and it would come out really nice. And I'll tell you what, that worked really well. Might as well get rid of these screws, right? Put a little discoloration underneath them as well. I believe these are the same screws used to hold down the top RF shield. I think they're all the same, about the same length and whatnot. So finding new ones is not that big of a deal. Yeah, the bottom side cleaned up really well. Looks better than it did anyway. Okay, how about the top side? Got the same problem with the ground edge. I know people have tried in the past and usually failed to clean this. I believe it's chromed steel shielding up. I've never actually tried myself. Every time I've ever seen somebody try to do it, they just sandpapered it, and then you could just tell it was, maybe they got down to the, what is it, like a copper or whatever layer that the chrome sticks to. I have no expectations of this actually helping that much. It may not be abrasive enough. Yeah, it's just not gonna help there. Pretty used to seeing those in rough shape anyway. Oh well. So one of the things I was curious about doing was getting this RF module out of here and possibly looking below that PCB, and also looking at that trace. So to get the module out, I usually start with plugging in the 808, and I usually cut these tabs. These are the little tabs that come down off of the RF module box to hold it down. And then I will desolder these pins when the 808's warm. Okay. Sure those are free. We'll also do the mounting pins because there is a ton of solder there. I'm not trying to make them completely free and clear though, because you gotta force it out anyway. You just do. Can't get much of that one there. About as good as it gets on that one. And I used to start with my Dole X-Acto to get underneath of it and try to start it, and this one's really easy, already broken off. And then just take the needle nose and work it out. There we go. I'm going to say the bottom of this module is really not caked that much, oddly enough. Maybe it washed out better than I thought. Yeah, that is definitely going in the trash. Would never, even just because of the rust on the connector poking through, it just looks bad, so this thing's going in the trash. And we might as well take the rear panel off, just so we can clean it up under there. I don't usually worry about solder sucking this until it's out. There we go, makes it easier to get back in. The hole's free and clear. And I also like to get these things off here if they're just excessively long. Seems like that ferrite bead right there, I think that's for audio. Seems like those legs are always excessively long. And we can clean this area a little bit better. Okay. Now, could get that main inductor off of there to get a good look at the trace, because I actually think the trace itself is okay. And I think what we're actually suffering from is a bad solder joint on the rectifier, because if you look at them real close, they look pretty crusty. Or maybe a bad joint on the inductor. It looks okay. And the bottoms look fine, but the top trace obviously is not connected on the bottom, it's connected on the top. And I might as well get that cap off there. I always replace the main cap, and you should too. Ooh, that looks crusty. It's fairly clean underneath though, isn't it? Not bad. Let's see, can you see the legs of the rectifier very well? If I zoom in here. You can see the long trace leading to that closest leg to you. That's the one we don't have continuity on. You can see there's some crusty action going on there. But I am betting the actual trace itself is okay. Ooh, I was wrong. There is some corrosion going on there underneath the inductor. It's possible I may have pulled that trace up with this, but by the looks of it, it was already... Ooh. Oh, I didn't know they did that. The legs come out. They're just kind of pressed into the plastic. Are they supposed to do that? Because I mean they're still soldered to the winding. See, these ones are a little harder to pull out. I have to ask some people that know more than me about that. Because we know the windings are okay. And I'm sure they're coated. They're coated well enough that the flood damage isn't going to affect it very much. I mean, I don't see any really bad corrosion on the windings anywhere. Just the typical dirt that we saw everywhere else on it. But yeah, I believe we've found the culprit of no power. I have to clean this thing again. I'll tell you what, all of these traces back here have got one heck of a bit of corrosion on them. This one's got some solder mask being corroded off, exposed copper, which we could actually just tin that. I thought I pulled that trace up, but it's still there. Just wasn't making good contact with the leg. The V is intact and the copper does not seem to be severed. Yeah, the Via may be a lot more damage than I thought. Push awfully hard to get it to make contact here. But it does not seem severed. Does not appear to be severed. So, I said I kind of want to tin the tops of those traces, at least the other ones. Soak some rosin flux on there. That's about all I can do for it. Well, yeah. Looks pretty good. I didn't want to cover that via. I'm gonna put the inductor back on there. This saying inductor is not quite right since there's two of them in there. But let's solder that back down. If it does not make contact, then we will add a wire here. Now, do we have contact? Let's see, we went from here to here, right? And then here to here? Hit it one more time just to be sure. That was way too much heat for way too long, but it's already damaged. No, we're going to have to add a wire to that one. So, because we're passing by some other stuff, I'm going to probably have to use something shielded instead of just a component leg or such. You know, it really wouldn't kill me to go ahead and double that one up too, since we've seen so much corrosion on that trace. Even though I did solder over it, it could still come back and bite us later. I don't love how that leg is pushing right against it, so I'm going to move it up. And this is component leg stuff, which is, this is probably from a large capacitor. Kill me to hold that with something that's not going to burn me, right? There we go. Now there's no way we don't have continuity there. Let's see, in fact we should have continuity from here to the leg, right? Yeah. I guess I should show that on camera. Right on. Now, let's get a new cap in there. Alright, so I got a good Nishikon brand cap. 1500 microfarad, 25 volts. Remember, your short leg is your cathode, and cats are negative. So short leg into the hole marked negative. And there you go, that is the component leg I was talking about. Save those, use them for repairs. Now, easily slide our rear panel back on here. Clean out the magic eraser stuff. Normally I would screw this back down before soldering it, because your screws will actually, well, your holes are big enough to where the whole panel will slide back and forth enough that you may not be centered with your holes. But if you're just mindful of it, you'll be alright. Getting close, at least to testing it. Let's see, I could actually test for 5 volts without the RF module in there. What power switches? It's awful gritty. That's another thing to look for, is those legs down in there. Those will often corrode and fail. So test for continuity with your switch on. Test it down here. If you don't have it, then look at those legs. I've repaired a bunch of those with those legs messed up. Alright, I just got a cheap Chinese AC adapter. I'm actually end up trying to sell these. I bought a bunch of them. They're 9 volt 2 amp. And the tip is special in that you can put 5.5 outside diameter or 2.5 and 2.1, because it's got those little tongs in there that spread apart. It works for both sizes. That's really cool. I won't be too distressed if we don't find 5 volts. because it could be the 7805 is just done. I always test for 5 right there. 5 volts. Look at that. Excellent. So now I'm going to go find a working RF module that's in decent shape and get it back in there. Alright, so I found one. Probably a leftover from the NES RGB days when we put the new rear multi-out connector on here. Might have to trim that off there completely. Not sure if I'm able to get that the force back down in there. There we go. Got a magic eraser in all my holes, I can't see nothing. There. Don't be afraid to leave your iron on these areas for a long time, because it's just nothing but ground plane and metal box trying to come together. Let's see if I can get that tongue away from the plastic a little more there. There we go. Now, could do a short test without the heat sink. Leave it on there too long, it'll go into thermal overload without that heat sink on there and shut off. It might freak you out and you won't know why. It's no biggie really. I mean, it's designed to shut off, but we don't want to force it. I think we're ready for a quick test. Alright, so it's hooked up. Oh, you've got a failure. I guess we could test to make sure it's not the RF module real quick. No, we've got garbled graphics down there too. Okay. Keep digging. Let's see if I can do the RAM test. Well, it looks like I've got a fail on the top one. I can never remember which one is which. Is it video on top or work on top? I think it was video, wasn't it? Anyway, I think we should probably look a little closer at the chips and traces for video RAM. Alright, so I've done this many times before, but we're going to remove the video RAM chip. And I'm going to start with putting more solder onto the legs. And then we can put the 808 on it. Now if I'm lucky, this thing will pop out with relative ease. It's dirty under there. Looks like we really only got a few traces under there though. And they seem to be okay. But definitely should check them out first. I guess if you know where they were routed to begin with, you could do this without having to remove the chip. Let's see, that one, that one. Yeah, I'd say all of the traces underneath the chip are fine. I could do that all day, but I believe probably need to test this chip. Alright, so I'm hooked up with the test board. Making sure it works right, and RF is not wanting to come in, so I went to composite. And then let's see, I think this one's video RAM. Doesn't matter, I just wanted to show something. Oh, I didn't get it in the right slots, did I? Yeah. Let's swap it into the work RAM and see what happens. Gray screen. Yeah, that's kind of what I figured, because work RAM's going to garble the whole thing, right? So you're not going to get any video. But if you got just like a couple things wrong with a video RAM, you might actually get a garbled screen. So I'm not sure a work RAM specific test ROM is going to do us much good. Well, anyway, now we know the video RAM chip itself is bad, so let's get a new one in there. Alright, so this chip was simply pulled from another working, probably front loader board. Get that in there. Okay, so dried off again. Look at that. Back in business. Alright, so let me get the heat sink back on there and then we'll let it cycle for a while. Okay, so we got some new screws on the rear panel and 3 screws on the heat sink. So I'm just going to let this run for 3 or 4 hours at least. Come back in here once in a while and hit the reset button. Make sure it's okay. Alright, so it's been running for many hours. It looks like crap, but that's just the RF. I don't really care about quality RF output. I'm not sure many people do. I thought it'd be a good chance to get the thermal camera out. And the only heat I see up front, I can get about 163 maximum on the CPU chip. Looks like I'm seeing about 126 on the PPU. There's really not any heat other than that on the front side. And I want to say that might actually be the rectifier, showing about 145 on the high side. That's about all in the back as well. I thought it'd just be fun to look at that. That doesn't really prove anything, I guess. It's really, I use this as a tool to find bad chips. Like if I had put it on here, maybe that memory chip would have showed some heat. I don't really know. I don't use it unless I'm just not sure. You know, and since we did that test ROM, we knew the video RAM was bad, so that was an easy fix. If that hadn't fixed it, then maybe I would have got a thermal camera. But I'd say it's safe to say this thing is in working condition now, at least. Try to do some more cleanup and get it back together. One thing I definitely got to do is lubricate this switch up. It's just too crusty. And that's probably all it takes. And it feels way more free and normal. Reset switch works fine, so that was easy. Well, I think I've gone as far as I want to go with cleaning it. May not be perfection, but it looks pretty good. The bottom plate I'm not super impressed with. It was quite dirty or scratched up or whatever to start with. And there's not much I can do for that. I could probably rub some WD-40 on it to make it look a lot better. But my main problem with it is the serial number sticker's gone. And, you know, I like to have that for tracking. I guess I could put a different bottom on it if I've got one that still has the number, or I might have a bottom that's been messed up in other ways that I could swap the serial number onto this one just for tracking reasons. RF connector looks a lot better than it did. And even the controller ports will look a lot better. Just trying to figure out something I could get in there and clean them better with. Actually, that doesn't quite work. I'm getting some dirt, but I'm not getting all the way back in there. It's not quite stiff enough. It's one of those things, as long as it's not completely full of dirt, I'm not going to give it too much more attention than I've already given it, so yeah. So the question now is, what do I do with it? It's a working Nintendo top loader, so the obvious thing would be high defness mod it and sell it on. But I kind of want to sell it to somebody that knows what it used to look like, what it's been through. So do I mod it and sell it? Do I replace the bottom shell? Do I just swap the serial number sticker? I'd like to know what y'all think. If there's anybody out there that's definitely interested in buying this. Unmodded, modded, I mean all AV modded, all high defness modded. I don't have any NES RGB kits on me. I'll do that if you want it, but I have high defness kits here. And I do have a couple AV mod kits here. We could do the TRS version where we just replace the, or we put the little jack in place of the RF. Get the little gray jack. TRS is tip ring sleeve. So there's 4 contacts on that connector, and it fits perfectly into that hole without any modifications. It's one of the better AV mod versions to do out there, and I never actually really released it. There are some people doing it, and I'm not sure they're quite doing it right because the connector was black, and I do have some black ones that are just TRS, tip ring sleeve, so I guess they're doing mono audio, video and ground. That's the only thing I can think of, and that's fine too. But I've been trying to stay away from doing the 3 RCA jack where you remove the sticker and put the 3 holes in the top shell, just because the less holes we can make the better. Still haven't figured out a way to make the high defness viable in that way. So let me know what you think, what I should do next. Let me know if you want to buy this.